Module 2. Hi, Joe Cerrone. Today we're going to cover drawing and editing and object commands from Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 of our textbook. If we take a look at our textbook, AutoCAD Comprehensive, our objectives are to use the appropriate values when responding to prompts, apply basic viewing methods, draw given using the line command, describe several point entry methods, use basic drawing aids, erase, undo, redo, and oops, and create selection sets. And so this chapter is really just about basic fundamentals. When we talk about working with numbers and responding to prompts, what we're talking about is x, y values as we work within a coordinate system. For these exercises, we're going to be working in both architectural and decimal units, and so we're going to work on this drawing, which would be a mechanical drawing, and if we wanted to look at the units, we'd say format units, and our mechanical title blocks are set up with decimal units. And so if I wanted to use that, what I would do is I would go in here and I would say line, and I'd say from this point. Now, if I'm not snapping to the grid, what I want to do is go to drafting settings. And so we'll go to drafting settings and we'll take a look at that setup. So if I turn the snap on and the grid on, now my snap is equal to the grid. Usually I'll make the snap half of my grid, just as a rule of thumb. I also want to have polar tracking enabled. Polar tracking will allow me to have these like little green rays that allow me to do what's called direct distance, which would allow me to just type in the value for the length of the line. And then object snap we'll take a look at a little bit later down the road. So now that snap and grid are enabled and polar tracking is also on, if I wanted to look at this mechanical title block, I could then go and set a starting point, and then with polar tracking, and this is the polar tracking button right here, you'll get this green line, and if I turn off the grid you'll see it like that, and it just makes things really easy. I can type 3 inches, spacebar or enter key, and then I get another track, 3 inches, 3 inches, and then 3 inches. If I want to look at the architectural drawings, we're working with different units, and so we're using architectural units, which would be feet and inches. And so when we wanted to create an input value at 18 feet by 16 feet, we'd say line, and then we would track that out with polar, and I'd say 18 apostrophe for feet. And then if I track north, I can say 16 apostrophe, 18 apostrophe, 16 apostrophe, and then I can hit escape to lift the pen up. So that's basically what the textbook talks about here. As far as ending and canceling commands, you can use the escape key or the enter key. As we look at drawing, what we're looking at is Cartesian, rectangular coordinates, etc. And on the AutoCAD website, if we take a look at that, and I'll walk you through how to get there. Content, Module 2, and we started the AutoCAD website in 2007 before the D2L system, and so some of the things are a little bit dated, but the content is great. So for example, we've linked to absolute coordinates using YouTube, relative polar, direct distance, a little bit on trig applications, and then this is one of the exercises that we'll do for the textbook, or for the module 2, which will be to create this number 1 using input methods of absolute and relative polar. Back to the textbook. So Our Cartesian coordinate system is an XY system, and basically depending on where the origin is located, those values will be relative to that point. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this thing called the user coordinate system, and so that's what this XY icon is. And what that really is it's where 0 is located on the drafting software. And so here it is. And then as we draw lines, what you'll notice is that once you start a line, it stays attached and you can continue to draw lines. As we get into coordinate systems, we'll do an exercise using absolute coordinates with the number 1. You can turn the coordinates display on or off in the system by clicking on the customization, and then you can turn on coordinates by checking it off, and then you'll notice that you get these coordinates. And you can also, on the Home tab, go to Utilities and ID a certain point. And if I go and I hover with Grid and Snap at this point, it tells me it's point 2, 1, and then this point is 2, 4, and this point is 3, 4. So everything is relative to our 0 position. And so if we count these grid units over, there's 2, 1, 2, 1. Dynamic input just means that the input follows the cursor, and you'll notice that as we start to work on these drawings. Again, just how to draw. As you're drawing, you'll notice that there's kind of a rubber banding effect. The computer is attached. Command line talks about how you would enter commands, and it's kind of the old school way to do it, where you have this thing called the command line prompt, which is right here. And so if I hit escape, you'll notice that it's cleared, and then if I type LIN, I start to get these commands. I can say line, and this is the command line. And so if I start right here and then I go like this, I can start to create lines. I can also erase them. Again, coordinate entry, as we go through, we can take a look at how to create drawings with coordinates. Grid mode, grid and snap are kind of linked together. Here's your grid, the way that's set up. As we look at AutoCAD, what we're looking at to turn on the grid would be Tools, Drafting Settings. And in the drafting settings, grid and snap kind of go hand in hand. And here's our drafting settings. Polar tracking is another tab on the drafting settings, and what that allows you to do is to do these direct distance type of commands, where when polar tracking is enabled, you'll get that green tracking line. Ortho mode basically just restricts cursor movement to horizontal and vertical. It's good for copying and moving things, and so if I had a part and I wanted to move it with ortho mode on, I could say copy, I could select it, and I could move it from here to here, and it's not going to get off of vertical or horizontal. That would be ortho mode. Object snap. Object snap is great once you learn how to use it. It can be a little bit trying because sometimes it'll snap to points that you don't necessarily want it to. But essentially, object snap makes sure that you're able to tie into the endpoints of lines. And so if I have object snap on, and object snap is going to be this one right here, and we can see which ones are available or which ones are on by looking at what is checked off. We can also click on the object snap settings and then turn that on with F3. With object snap on, when I draw a line or a circle or any command, I will get a little glyph that tells me it's attached to the endpoint there. If I turn off my ortho, I can turn it back on, endpoint. It'll work with other commands, other drawings like circles. Again, grabbing the endpoint. Introduction to editing. As you've seen throughout this exercise, I've been erasing things. Most of the time I'll just click on it and get a grip on there and then hit the delete key. You can also hit the U key to undo a command, or the backwards arrow, or redo if you undo something and you want to bring it back. Oops command is another old command where if you erase something you can say oops to get that back. As far as object selection, what they're looking at is crossing windows and non-crossing windows, or blue versus green windows. When the cursor makes a window that's green, it will select everything that it touches. And so if I come over here and I want to erase this box here, I can say erase, and then as I drag this cursor across, it just has to touch this. It doesn't have to completely enclose it. And so I could erase these 3 lines, versus if I undo that and then I want to erase it with a blue window, it only selects what's completely within the box. And so it depends on whether I pick from the left to the right or the right to the left. More examples of selection sets. The lasso, I really don't like this. I can show you how to turn that off and turn it on. I typically leave it off. And so if I wanted to lasso, what I'll do is I'll go to right mouse click, options, and then selection, and then allow press and drag for lasso. And so with lasso on, I think I can, yeah, just kind of swing that around like that, and it'll select whatever's in there. And if I swing it around this way, same thing, except with a blue window it only selects what's completely in there. To turn that off, you can right click, go to options, and then go to selection and uncheck allow for lasso. I prefer it off. More on object selection. Fencing, meaning you can kind of skewer these different geometries. Cycling through object selection, you can hit the tab key and select through different selections. It's really more difficult than just by hitting escape and clicking on the part. Okay, so that's chapter 3. We're going to take a look at some of these exercises with a couple other videos as we do it. As we go through, we'll look at how to create this number 1 with absolute coordinates, and then we'll look at how to draw a mechanical part and how to draw an architectural part. That completes this exercise.